And I look at the service, of course, the hospitality, of course, how it makes me feel, but I'm also looking, how are they showing up with the rest of the team, not just at the table? How are you working with the bar back? How are you working with the kitchen? I pay attention to all that because that's what's going to be important in the work setting. Yes, you're going to be able to exceed expectations in your own role and as an individual, but how are you working with the group? Because anyone can show up and say, this is how I work, this is how I operate, and I can do everything wonderfully on my own. Yes, because that you can control. But how are you working together with an entire team? And that, I think, is where a lot of people struggle.
This episode is brought to you by FultonFishMarket.com, the most trusted name in seafood. FultonFishMarket.com is the e-commerce provider for New York's iconic Fulton Fish Market, the largest seafood market in the Western Hemisphere, trusted by top chefs for over 200 years. Fulton Fish Market provides a range of world-class seafood options. FultonFishMarket.com can help you serve a wide range of customers, whether you serve high-profile individuals or just strive for culinary excellence. They deliver directly to your doorstep in all 48 contiguous states, providing a comprehensive selection of the finest seafood, from wild fish to caviar and shellfish. When it comes to seafood, FultonFishMarket.com is our go-to destination and the name we trust. Let's celebrate those who support us and dive into this episode of the Private Chef podcast with a taste of excellence and freshness. Visit www.fultonfishmarket.com to get 15% off your first order. Use code PrivateChef at checkout. Welcome to the Private Chef podcast, serving the 1%. I'm your host, Hennche. And on our show, we speak to the best chefs, how they honed in on their skills to excel in the industry, and what it takes to work as a private chef for some of the most exclusive clients in the world. Welcome back to the Private Chef podcast. I'm your host, Hennche. Today, we've got an exciting topic on the menu: estate management and world-class team building. And joining us as our special guest is none other than Alin Urkumyan. Aline is a true expert when it comes to estate management and personal assistance and team building. She's had a career in the luxury private service industry, catering to numerous ultra-high net worth clients. With over 17 years of experience in managing and leading teams in Fortune 500 luxury hotels, providing top-notch personal care service for high net worth individuals, overseeing private residences, even handling luxury high-rise multifamily properties. Aline has truly done it all. Currently, she's leading a diverse team of 24 people from different backgrounds, ethnicities, and has a lot of insights into the challenges of building world-class teams. Welcome to the show, Aline.
Thank you. That was quite the introduction. Thanks.
Well, you've lived it. It's your life, it's your experience, which should make it very easy for you to speak to it. And we've already had a really interesting conversation about why I was so interested in having you on the podcast, because you and me relate a lot when it comes to being in charge of our nervous system and kind of anchoring the human experience regardless of what's happening around us. And I think that's something that is more and more crucial in a world that's bombarding us with so many different things. There's more and more messages, there's more and more news, there's more and more ways to get in touch with us, there's more requirements. And I think you're a voice in this space, in our space, the luxury private service industry. I also want to acknowledge you for sharing that kind of contact, inspiring people to look within and see, okay, how am I responding to this world and the challenge it's throwing at us?
Yeah, it's a huge topic, but it's an important one. And I think it is true that it starts with self. And I know I've always been driven by looking at how I played a role in a situation, whether it's good or negative, and it could be something that is 100% wrong. And I'll agree that it's wrong, but I'll still look into myself. How did I maybe contribute to it getting to this point? And now how can I step back and de-escalate the best way I can?
Where did that journey start for you? Was there like an aha moment where okay, life is not 100% real as I look at it, but it's actually a diverse experience for many different people. Where did you have that moment in life where it clicked for you? I'm like, okay, my nervous system might suggest me a different experience versus what's real in this moment, or versus what's the other person is experiencing.
Right. At an insanely young age, I was probably in pre-kindergarten, so that puts me at like 4 years old. I think I realized it, but didn't grasp fully what that meant. And I think throughout my entire year, that one experience really made me always go back to self. Is it me, or did something else happen? And really evaluate the situation. It was in school, and I was sort of the odd person out and didn't really have any friends. And the girl in the class that was very, I guess, popular for the 4-year-old group, one day came up to me. And so actually, let me back up for a second. So in the classroom, there was this structure where you sort of set the teacher had these things on envelopes on the wall where you got points for doing things good. Every single day, I would not only meet the expectation, exceed the expectation, but I never, ever received any of these points in my envelope. And I always wondered, what am I doing wrong? There was no feedback. There was no communication, but everyone else in the class got points, and they probably did half the work that I did, if they did it at all. And so I was very confused. And anytime I asked the teacher a question or leaned in, like, why am I not getting points? They would send me home for asking questions. And so if the feeling felt odd, because I wasn't used to that. I was used to being in an environment where I could ask questions and it was okay. And one day, the girl with the class comes up to me and she says, "We want to give you all our points because we noticed that you don't get any ever." And in that moment, I was like, wow, that's really special and, thoughtful. And so I accepted it because it was like, oh, now I have friends. This will be wonderful, playful kid things. And you really don't know much about the world and people yet, but you're in tune with your feelings, I think, at that age. And I'd say a few minutes later after that, the teacher grabs me and she calls me a thief. And I thought to myself, what is she talking about? And so the classroom then went and told her that I took all the points from them. And then it was a really strange feeling that I couldn't pinpoint, but I was then in a position where now the entire class and this teacher thought I did something that I didn't, and that I was this terrible person. And so that incident made me really look at the situation. And I never told my parents about it as a kid because I didn't want to get in trouble even more than I was in school. So I internally sort of evaluated the situation as, I'm not a bad person. I didn't do these things and I've been doing my work. Is this really about me or is this really about all these other people? And so ever since that situation, I sort of just look at every situation in that way.
I think that's a very healthy early life lesson to learn.
A big one for sure. And so I do see lots of things that happen in my life throughout the years always relate back to that one experience. And so I always think to myself, let me step back and think, is this really about me or is there other things happening? And yeah, it was a very young age to learn that lesson. And I don't know. I think also my parents sort of raised me in an environment to question things and, look at things from a different perspective as much as possible. And I think with that guidance at that young age, I was able to look at it from that perspective.
Yeah.
I can't take all the credit.
But I think it's so important to have those moments in life where we look back and like, okay, the world is not how we necessarily experience it. Like what our mind suggests us most of the time is not reality for the situation or the other people.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is one of the challenges in team building, whenever there's room for interpretation, between people that come from very different cultural backgrounds, or just have a different point of view based on their family history. And then how do you get to common ground and make something work if you haven't done that kind of internal work, maybe?
Right. I think everyone has experienced something similar to what I did. I don't know, maybe they haven't, but I think as humans, most people have dealt with something similar. And I think it's important to realize that, bridging the gaps and leaning in with curiosity truly is what bridges the gaps in communication and relationship building. But that feeling I felt when I was 4 is something that I didn't want to experience, but the reality is you will over time. And I guess, you can't control other people's actions, but you can control your own reactions, is a very true statement that I'm sure we've all heard, but it's very true because, you can handle each situation mindfully, thoughtfully. And I think team building is just relationship building is at the end of the day, connection building. And it's how do you connect to people and remembering that we are all people and we're all humans and we've all experienced probably the same things in different ways. And that's really it. And I think that's what leads me into those conversations. But I don't know, for someone who hasn't been through those things, is it possible to teach it? I don't know. I've tried and I think it's something, it takes more work for people who haven't been in those situations. They have to also want to do that work. I think people are quick to judge and, I'll challenge the judgment all day long. But they have to want to do the work and want to see it differently. But I don't know. Sometimes judges like to be judges, and that's okay too.
Is it something that you look for when you hire? Is that people have that level of self-reflection? Is it something that you seek in new team members?
So I like to hire by going out into the world and watching people in their element, working somewhere else. And I'll sit and observe for a while and see who I would actually hire based on how they're working together with a team. And I'll try to poach if I can. I'll leave my business card for the ones that I want to take on. But you can see.
I think that's more common than one would think. So I have a bunch of friends in the restaurant industry. And when they see a world-class waiter, they are very friendly, and they're like, we also own restaurants.
Right. Yes. And I look at the service, of course, the hospitality, of course, how it makes me feel, but I'm also looking, how are they showing up with the rest of the team, not just at the table? How are you working with the bar back? How are you working with the kitchen? I pay attention to all that because that's what's going to be important in the work setting. Yes, you're going to be able to exceed expectations in your own role as an individual, but how are you working with the group? And I think that's important because anyone can show up and say, this is how I work, this is how I operate, and I can do everything wonderfully on my own. Yes, because that you can control. But how are you working together with different people, an entire team? And that, I think, is where a lot of people struggle, especially in the post-COVID world.
How do you feel the effect within your team? Like, I remember the first time that I went to a big public gathering after being kind of locked up, and I felt uncomfortable. And then I was thinking, I used to go to concerts more often, and then the first public gathering I went to was the US Open in New York, and it wasn't even that dense. It's like we had seats, but it was the most people in one arena and I felt like, oh, this is different.
I could not wait. I was excited to get back into all the things that we called normal. But during COVID, I didn't fully stay in lockdown. I went out as much as I could with my group friends, not carelessly, carefully, of course, but I tried to travel and get out and what I could do within my limitations, but safely. It didn't feel uncomfortable at all for me.
How did it affect the teamwork? Because there's so much Zoom happening these days, so actually being in a room together, also the dynamic, the exchange is different. Communication changes. There's so much more text and Slacks and, Notion, and then being in an actual office setting again.
I've noticed that people have, I guess, more self-inflated in what they need, not in a selfish way, just more communicative, which I think is healthy. And it's interesting that it took a struggle for people to be able to communicate what they need, because I think in a pre-COVID world, people didn't communicate what they needed, and it was not as easy to connect with people. But now people are more comfortable being vulnerable and sharing what they need. So I look at that as a positive thing. And I think people require more context, it seems, which isn't a terrible thing either. Because if you want information, you also have to give information. So I've noticed it's helped communication overall. People speak up more.
Yeah.
And that helps the team dynamics for sure. I start every morning with a team meeting. Everyone has a voice. Everyone can share what's going on in their mind. We spend the first, 10 minutes talking about ourselves and what we've done and personal part. And then we get into the work stuff, because I think it's important that we share a piece of ourselves so that people can understand who we are and then get into work.
But in my experience, that takes a certain level of trust. And as you said earlier, the word connection, I think generally speaking, unless you maybe encourage that, people are rather uncomfortable opening up, depending on the team dynamics. So how do you encourage those healthy team dynamics where people are actually comfortable opening up and sharing that bit of their personal life?
The ones who don't feel comfortable, if they don't want to participate, I let them not participate. Only ever once did one person say, wasn't ready for this question. And that's because they're sort of a self-perfectionist and they wanted to perfect their answer. Not ready to answer this question. Come back to me later. We'll answer it tomorrow. That's fine. Okay. I don't pressure anyone. And they know with me, at least, it's a safe environment. They can and they cannot if they don't want to participate. It's something related to work and it's a task, the task needs to get done. And so someone will do it, but I revisit the conversation with the individual that might be uncomfortable. And we start there in the conversation with me and go through, what about the task is uncomfortable? How can we make it comfortable? What does comfortable look like to you? And,
So what if the comfortable part of the person that's supposed to do the task doesn't align with how the task is supposed to get done, or maybe the original objective of the task?
I don't think there's any one way to do a task. And I think that's where people get lost in. They think that there is only one way to do something, and there isn't.
Yeah,
so I think as long as we
partly guilty of that.
If we get to the outcome, regardless, I don't think it matters how we get there as long as we're not doing anything illegal, right? Or morally, ethically wrong. But yeah.
Sorry for the interruption, but we gotta share the news with you. Nothing Fishy from FultonFishMarket.com. They're delivering world-class seafood from New York City's legendary Fulton Fish Market straight to your door. Their fishmongers have helped countless chefs get what they need when they need it for over 200 years. Trusting FultonFishMarket.com means their experts work tirelessly to make your day run smoothly. Let your cooking skills shine and elevate your dishes with amazing seafood from FultonFishMarket.com. I'll give you a funny one. So my wife Indian, me German. I'm just by default, it's part of how we operate. I'm very rule oriented, And the other day we went to a government office and it was so funny because I remember the actual entrance used to be right where we were, but they changed how you walk into the building. So this was now the exit. And I immediately, when I saw the sign, turned around and wanted to walk around the building to basically end up in the same room. And my wife was like, "What? Like, let's just try to get in here." And I was already like, come on. And then funny enough, the security from the inside made an effort to open the door for us and let us in. And and she just gave me that look because, I just tried to go by the rule, the one way. And she's like, see, the door opened. We can just walk in.
That's a great example. That's exactly what it's like. And I'm not saying that rules should not exist. There's, things that exist for a reason. But, I always look at things. Can something be done a little bit differently, more efficiently? Does this make sense to go all the way around? I probably would agree with your wife on that one.
Yeah, and then maybe on the other days when the office is actually flushed with people and then their workflow makes sense. But when we showed up, which was Friday afternoon, and there was literally no other person there than us, and the security was bored anyway, it made perfect sense to just walk straight through the door.
Right? Yeah. So those are the conversations I have. I can tell someone how to do their job all day long, but then they come back with, I don't want to be micromanaged and I don't want you to tell me how to do my job. Okay. Well, how do you want to do it? Let's talk about how we get to the end, because at the end of the day, the outcome has to happen. So how do we get there? And you can tell me what that looks like to you. And if it doesn't work, then we'll have to do it my way. But we cannot waste too much time doing that experiment.
I actually think that micromanaging kills spirit in people. Like, I've been part of teams where you eventually felt like everything is wrong anyway because the micromanaging member of the structure came around. And then you just get to a point where you will play everything as safe as possible, which is basically where you don't do a great job anymore because you're just trying to get away with the safe thing rather than, trying to create something better for everybody. Or in culinary sense, it's maybe bring a new dish to the table where, okay, yeah, maybe it's slightly different, but it could also be a great new experience. But you eventually start just catering to the safety net.
It's true. Not a huge fan of micromanage. I personally don't like being micromanaged, and I don't micromanage. I like to hire the right people in positions and trust them to do their job. And if they need my support and my help to do their job, or they need resources, I'm there. I'm a proponent for make the mistakes. Like, we're not doing open heart surgery. Make the mistakes, learn from it, and grow from it. Maybe don't do it again. That's my process.
Even so tough.
Because at least they're trying. Try. Make the mistake. It's okay. Unless it's going to be harmful to someone's life. But that's one of the struggles I have with, one of my team members is he won't even try. He won't even try because he's afraid of making the mistake. Like, well, what's the worst thing that's going to happen is what I challenged, because I realize it comes from a place of fear and anxiety. So I challenged it with the question, what is the worst thing that could happen if you try and do not get it right? And they kind of freeze because they don't even know. But, if for me, and this is extreme, for me, it's like if it's not death, then just try. Go for it.
I'm with you.
Everything else in the middle, it's whatever. If you're not going to die by failing, then go for it.
Yeah, and then maybe everybody has their own idea of what death means in that scenario. Like, but I think that's a good distinction. There's actually, so see, will I get tapped out on that? Like that's a good rule. I'm like, okay, will this be a final shot? If not, you can try. And then there's another one that I like also is for personal things is I like to look at like, okay, will I regret this 10, 30 or 50 years from now? Like there's those, and I like to think in those terms because it makes situations very clear. Like, okay, it's not going to kill me and I won't regret it 50 years from now. So it's worth a shot.
Right. Yeah. I have a rule. No regrets.
Yeah.
I would say Edith Piaf's song is probably my theme song, but no regrets. But I think, we make decisions in the moment because it feels right to us at that time. And if it's the wrong decision, then it's the wrong decision. And that's life. We have consequences sometimes to the decisions we make, and we shouldn't regret it because it felt right in the moment.
I also think that the more paralyzing way to live is being afraid of making a decision and I much rather have a habit of making decisions faster and going with things based on my value system and my best knowledge than living in the paralysis of not making a decision. Like for me, that's the worst experience of life. If I'm just stuck in, I'm not making any judgments in the sense that I don't get things done. I don't, put down a pin in the map when things have to be decided, those kind of things. Like I much rather live with the consequences.
Right. Interesting. I think for me, some things if I can make the decision now, why not? I'll go for it. Make the fast decision. Some things I think require monitoring for a little bit to see if it's actually going to be effective before implementing it. But for the most part, I'm very solution oriented. I recognize the problem is there, but, and I think that's also what helps with the calm. To every single problem, there is a solution. That's just what it is. The yin, the yang, the good, the bad, the dualities. Every problem, there's a solution. So as long as you know what the solution is, I think that solves a lot of people's anxieties and can help, bring that nervous system back to its calm, knowing that there's an outcome.
Well, there's always an outcome, but it might not be the outcome that somebody thinks is a positive solution.
That's true. But does it always have to be a positive solution?
No, I mean, on a long enough time horizon, everything is kind of neutral anyway.
Right. Yeah.
Like the question is just how granular are we looking at it? Like, okay, maybe in the span of one day, this looks lethal, like because my boss will fry me. Then maybe in the span of 2 weeks, this still hurts because it was so bad and mood at work changed. Maybe in the span of a year, it doesn't matter. In the span of 10 years, it most likely won't matter.
Right.
And then if you 100,000 years, almost nothing human matters after 1,000 years.
That's true. You make a good point.
Well, I think this really puts things in perspective. And one of the things I like to do is take late night runs so I can see the stars, because it reminds me in a positive way of how insignificant I am. It's like, okay, I'm standing on this massive round ball of Earth spinning in a solar system, which is like floating around in the cosmos. And here I am having all these ideas and troubles in my head. And, and then the latest, you're just like, okay, it really doesn't matter. Even though in that particular moment, something might really matter to me as a human being or to another human being. And I will respect that. But in the grand scheme of things, there's really nothing that important.
It's true. That's ego you're talking about, I think. There's ego. I think when we separate ourselves from ourselves, that's when we can really start making good decisions for the whole. Definitely. I started, I think during COVID. Yeah, when COVID first started, I took up Qigong to get my certification in it. I discovered it for the first time actually in England. I was headed to a yoga class, and the yoga class was canceled. I was like, well, that's the universe, how it's going to work today. But they replaced it with a Qigong class. And I was like, okay, I'll take it. I don't know what it is yet, but let's go with it. So I was like, this is maybe what I'm supposed to now implement into my life. Like, this happened for a reason. I'm a proponent of that for sure. Things happen for a reason. And I've done yoga for a while. And yes, I love it and I see its value and what it brings into my life. But the instant calm and connection with self that I felt within one class of Qigong I had never done before or even understood the concept of was mind-blowing. I couldn't even put words to it. So immediately...
So why was it so instant in Qigong?
Because it's a movements that really engage with your organs. So the best way, it's like Tai Chi, so much slower pace. You really step back and have to be patient with yourself, which has always been I can give the patience to everyone in the world. Patient with myself is something that's always been a struggle. And I was able to really do it in that class. And your body, you're really engaging with your organs and creating that blood flow. And I think that's what it was for me, is engaging my organs. It's sort of like it is, a technique that you're massaging your organs at the end of the day is what it is, really, which we never really do. And I felt the benefits of it within 45-minute class. I think that's what it was. Is I felt the blood flow. I was doing the breath work. And that was what was. Yoga is a flow and you're doing it, but Qigong really involves like you're actually touching yourself in those organs where those organs are. So it's very instant.
Yeah. I think both are doorways to, I would suggest the same experience. It's tools to point you towards the same realization of the present.
100%. Fully being present is what it was.
That's something I like to use is, and I try to do it more often every moment of the day. It's just like reminding myself that in this moment right now, there's really no problem whatsoever. And that's true for most moments. And then there's situations that we have to deal with. But it's really only when I try to solve too much of the past and too much of the future in my mind at the same time that I get overwhelmed. But the more I'm able to stay with this current moment, and the body, the physique, like the organs, the blood pressure, like feeling the sensations of my body, each one of those is a doorway to the present moment because it allows me to focus and allows me to tune in with this particular moment.
Yeah.
And yeah.
It's very true. I do, when people express their stresses or anxieties in life, it's always related to the past or the future.
Yeah.
Never about what's happening right now.
Yeah. So the ability to stay centered there, that's really where I would say the power of life is in a way. It's where it gets juicy, where it gets joyful, and where you unleash almost a superhuman capacity to deal with certain things. And then for me, the only challenge is how much can I take on while remaining in that space. That's kind of like how I look at success. And you framed that once on LinkedIn. But, if I can remain centered, then I can take on more.
Mm-hmm.
And then I might get to a threshold where I'm like, get completely thrown off. And then like, okay, I have to make adjustments to maybe my life here a little bit.
And now you're speaking of mind control.
I'm not sure if it's so much mind control. Like mind control sounds like I'm actually in charge of the mind. But in my experience, it's more so not stirring up the mind and having a little bit of a distance, which naturally lets the activity of the mind fade away. But I wouldn't ever say that I have any control over my mind. Like my mind in that sense is very much a wild thing. The only difference is that if I stay present, I have the ability to distance myself from and look at it like it's like some show that's going on. I'm like, here we go again, some monkey dance.
Yeah, no, I hear what you're saying. Also during COVID, I did neuro-linguistic programming, which is sold as mind control, I guess. But it is a practice that's used, I think, at like highest level of securities and sales people to engage other people to do things. But the class I took was for how do I use that tool for myself and my own mind. I don't care about the language of everyone else's mind. I'm really good at connection and people, so I don't need to manipulate people to get answers and work together. But how do I understand my mind? How do I make changes with myself if I want? Or how do I manage my emotions if faster, right? So it was a really unique experience in learning how my brain works, how it processes, and then given the tools to, process the emotions out faster so that I can be fully present in human conversations, in team building exercises, in conflict at work with other people in a post-COVID world. And it has probably been one of the best classes experience I had ever taken, because it was, I guess revolutionary in a sense to where, if someone comes and yells at you, it's going to evoke some sort of feeling, not a positive one. Yeah. And so this NLP course helped me, at the end of the day, I'm an empath. So it helped me really be able to process my personal emotions out immediately, presently in the moment, so I can be available to the person across from me who is clearly having the experience and not me. And that was what the benefit of that was.
Yeah, it's almost like we have to flush it out.
Right.
Yeah, like we have to flush it out of our system, because once we're triggered, it's in the body. It's not just in the mind. The mind is one thing, but as long as it's in the body, it's almost like
right.
You cannot have a sober conversation.
Right.
Like we don't care about facts as long as our body is like ready to fight or flight.
It's true, because the body does have a reaction to the emotion, because it remembers the emotion and it stores the emotion, and that's your body's reaction to the emotion. And so when taking NLP and learning how I can instantly process those emotions out so I can be present for the person across from me, who's the one experiencing the issue, that it was, I don't know why I didn't know about this sooner. I wish I did.
I wish this would be part of any school curriculum. This is the stuff that would make for a better not environment, society, basically.
It's true.
Where if people have these tools, it applies everywhere, whether it's in a family setting or serving ultra high net worth individuals. I think it's a superpower serving ultra high net worth individuals to be that self-reflected, because then you can always be in your role and you'll never lose your cool, no matter how crazy the requests get.
Mm-hmm.
But I think anybody benefits from it, especially in family and home situations. It just makes for a more homey and whole family experience.
Yeah. And the woman that I took the classes from is actually working on that. Her goal is to get it into schools at, the preschool and kindergarten level. Imagine the society we would be in if people actually could manage their emotions and separate themselves from what someone else is feeling and what you're feeling.
But it's I think it's hard.
It's not easy, for sure. Those are some of the tricks she teaches, is the words we use, how they shape our mind and our belief system.
So I should tell myself it's easy.
Well, so our brains do not compute the negative. So if you say it's hard, or you say not easy, because then your brain doesn't actually compute the word not. It's non-existent, because you can't create an image for it in your brain. But easy is something that you can picture. So when you say not easy versus it's hard, it becomes easier over time, because your brain sees the issue as easy. If that makes sense.
Okay.
So
I have to think of that.
Or, it's the example that we hear over and over again. If I tell you not to think of an elephant, don't think of an elephant. All you can think about now is the elephant.
Yeah. Well, this is also why I said that I don't really think there is such a thing as mind control in that sense. At least from a mental level, you can't. But the beauty is from a physical level, you can. Like breath work, mm-hmm. moving the body. For me, it's very obvious. When I have a certain tension in my system, the easiest way for me to work through is through physical change. I can take a cold shower. I can take a run. I can do some physical invigorating work, mm-hmm. something, and I can flush it through the system. Mm-hmm. But if you put me in a situation like that and you tell me to sit down in a chair, it will take me a lot longer,
right,
to work through it, unless I proactively, for example, engage my breath.
That's true.
Or I recenter through a certain technique. But if I just sit there without trying to be on top of it, it will take me a lot longer to kind of flush through the physical response of this experience.
It's true. That's why I do a lot of my one-on-one meetings with my managers by walking. We walk and do our meeting. If we do our group meetings every day, we start with like a stretch, and we're talking through the meeting, stretching, just to get a different part of the brain going. And the information is absorbed differently versus sitting still.
Yeah. Well, who was it? Steve Jobs already did walking meetings. So I think there's something to that.
For sure. They work. I definitely recommend it.
Well, Aline, we're actually already kind of running up on time here. Thank you so much for making the time. And where can people connect with you, find out more about you, and also follow all the great LinkedIn suggestions and posts that you have out there?
Yeah, I think the best way to connect with me is on LinkedIn.
Awesome. And then we'll also make sure to add that to the show notes. And thank you so much again for making the time, and sharing all of those insights that I think then the soft skills called for a reason, but they're so essential to the success in, the industry that we're in.
Definitely. Thank you for having me, for sure. This was really insightful as well for me. And I love that we connected.
We'd like to thank our sponsor, FultonFishMarket.com, the best seafood in the nation, trusted by the best chefs in the world. Aside from offering premium seafood, they also make life easier for you by delivering all these outstanding products right to your doorstep. Visit the official website www.fultonfishmarket.com and explore their incredible selection of seafood and let your clients experience quality that has captivated palates for generations. Use code PRIVATECHEF at checkout to get 15% of your first order. When it comes to seafood, FultonFishMarket.com is the name we trust.
Thank you for joining us at the Private Chef podcast. If you know any highly skilled chefs that want to take their life to the next level, make sure to share this podcast with them. And if you enjoyed this episode, click subscribe and check out our upcoming episodes. Thank you for listening.